Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, taking a fun and exciting video for you guys today, especially if you like Ridge Racer. Finally, we have one game in the Ridge Racer Pantheon, 100% statically recompiled for PC. And interestingly enough, it's going to be starting with Rave Racer, even if Ridge Racer just got its decompilation finished. And honestly, we've been getting a lot of Ridge Racer love recently, with all of Wanzai's ports over to PC, with enhanced emulation from MAME and graphical improvements. But a lot of people out there love Rage Racer, myself included. I still remember playing it on the original PlayStation 1, so seeing a static recomp, even if it is still in active development for one of the best racing games on PlayStation 1, definitely exciting. Although if I'm being entirely honest, if I had to pick one, R4 would have been where I started, but I totally get it. We get what we get, and we should be happy about it, and I definitely am. Before you get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out, and if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link down below as well. But this is coming from a developer going by Kaczynski on GitHub. No, not the guy who likes sending packages in the 90s, but a completely different Kaczynski. All jokes aside, if you're not as old as me, that joke might not hit, but I'm sure you'll get the reference if you did grow up in the 90s like I did. And as far as how this is made, it is fully statically recompiling everything about the PlayStation 1 version of the game. The code, all the calls to hardware, as far as the graphics and audio are concerned, and it is doing a very effective job of it. It's running in an enhanced renderer as well, getting a higher frame rate, no polygonal wobble or otherwise warping of the textures, and this really absolutely feels outstanding, especially in widescreen 16:9 mode. But the nice thing about this recomp is you can run it in the enhanced renderer, you can run it in the original renderer. If you notice right there, sometimes the wheels on the cars get a little bit wibbly. And that is because, like I said previously, this is still not finished. The build is available now for you to test out because the developer wants some bug reports on this one. I helped out because there was an issue on Windows actually getting one of the versions to launch and run correctly, so I went through this with the developer in the GitHub issue tickets, kind of reported what I was finding, and they were able to actually button it up and tell me that that was useful because they are not a Windows user, so they didn't have a machine except a virtual environment to test on. That is why it is so important for people, especially fans of these franchises, to test these games and then report back as to what's going on. And you'll see here both first person as well as third person camera views work, although honestly this game feels so much slower in third person mode. I really do feel like basically every Ridge Racer game is always intended on playing in first person, but I did want to show you guys the graphical difference so you can understand that I wasn't quote unquote hiding anything. I was just using the preferred camera that I like to play Ridge Racer and every other Ridge Racer game with. And again, on the performance side of things, that's where the real benefit is. You might notice that the draw distance is so good now that it'll actually start drawing things way off of the distance that normally would kind of pop in a little bit smoother. And like I said, still work in progress, but sometimes you can make a game from the PlayStation 1 era look so pretty that you actually start noticing a little bit about how it's constructed for better and for worse. And for those of you that care and those of you that don't care, you get the same information. There's nothing on the repo whatsoever about any LLM usage or Johnny 5. So as far as I can tell, this is made by human hands with the recompilation tools available to people to recompile PlayStation 1 games right now. So if you care, if you don't care, now you know. We can move on to the next bit, which has got to be the performance on this one. It is fast, it is fluid, it ran at the proper frame rate, getting even better performance than PlayStation 1 hardware. And that's absolutely what you want. And we're getting to a point in time where I feel like, at least obviously on the arcade side of things, we have perfect emulation and enhancements, and now we have Rave Racer that by the time it's buttoned up will be a better experience than real PlayStation 1 hardware or DuckStation. That means we have stuff like the original Ridge Racer, which just got its decompilation 100% completed, and stuff like R4, which is still my favorite game in the franchise. And I feel like in the next 18 to 24 months, now that we have PSP recomp tools as well, you're going to see a large majority of the actual Ridge Racer library getting these static recomps, and we're going to all be better for it. Because Rave Racer was definitely the next evolution in the Ridge Racer franchise, because we had the original arcade game as well as 2, and because Rave Racer never came home, we didn't really get any new tracks on home consoles until Rave Racer actually came out. Well, let's do the first or two soundtrack samples, but I will tell you one of the bugs right now is when the track ends, it doesn't actually loop. But go ahead and listen, I'll be right back.
That record. 2 laps to go.
So that definitely sounds like Rave Racer to me, but you leave me a comment down below and you tell me what you think. Because I say in basically every recap video right now, audio issues are not something I pick up on unless they are glaring. Obviously, when the soundtrack fails to loop after the track is over, that's something that's easy to notice because the music suddenly disappears. But if that is slightly off in tone or the sound effects are slightly louder or quieter than they would be on real hardware, that's something that I don't always actually notice. But the easiest to notice thing is clearly how good this game looks and how good it runs, because we've had a bunch of different PlayStation 1 recomps come out. Some have fixed up the polygonal warping, some aren't quite there yet. Obviously the number one PS1 recomp right now, as far as just excitement is concerned, is the Castlevania Symphony of the Night recomp, but I think Rage Racer is going to go right near the top of the list, because there's so many people out there that do love this game. And I apologize for hitting the wall there. Just 2 days ago I was playing Rave Racer for that video, and I definitely still have the memory of that game's physics in my head, because Rave Racer definitely changed up just enough about the franchise to make it new and fresh. But if you try to jump into Rage Racer from anything else, it definitely takes a minute to get used to the overall control scheme and drifting, which is more accelerator based and less brake based. As we come around this corner here, you can see the fluidity in the motion of the actual frame pacing, and everything is just holding up really well. Every once in a while you might notice a slight seam in some of the polygons and textures, and that's just something that's always going to be inherent to PlayStation 1, because that really is the interesting thing about PS1 recomps versus N64 recomps. I do think N64 just ends up cleaning up better when you bump the internal rendering resolution and you give it those new kind of rendering engines underneath. And even though this is hyper impressive, I always wonder if PlayStation 1 will ever reach the same level of impressiveness as an N64 static recomp or an N64 source port based upon a decompilation. And that's just because there's something about the N64 aesthetic that lends itself to being increased in its resolution, I think a little bit more than PlayStation 1. But you can definitely go down below and you tell me how you feel about that statement. And all the things that aren't in engine, like the menus here, they will still be at 4:3. They're not going to be stretched, which is nice. And that's just because when you're in the engine, getting 16:9 out is a lot easier technically than trying to actually do it in 2D elements. The one thing I do notice though, and this could still be in the engine, I'm sure it could be kind of patched up to change, is the skybox seems to refresh at a lower frame rate than everything else does. You kind of see the skybox jump around. Maybe it is just not a smooth transition, or maybe it's running at half the frame rate that the actual rest of the game is, but it is the only other thing I noticed outside of the fact that the draw distance being so good sometimes gives you pop in and you can see parts of the actual geometry just floating out into the distance. And that's something that was definitely a little bit more obscured on the PlayStation 1 version, but still something you could notice. But honestly, from the color arrays here, to the rendition of all the graphics, to the audio and everything else, it is very hard to find anything to point to say this isn't doing exactly what you need it to do. And because it is a racing game and I always want more racing recomps, absolutely stoked that it really makes me hope that sometime soon we'll be playing an R4 recomp, because that would definitely be my kind of gold standard for the Ridge Racer franchise. Well, let's do one more soundtrack sample. Still going to hear the audio, but if you do play this one, again, just be aware that when the song actually ends in a race, it's not going to restart. You're just going to go down to silence. But go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back with just a little bit more.
Ooh, not boring. Okay, it's the last trip. Keep it up.
So not only does the audio sound good, it also is amazing just because it is a Ridge Racer game, and you know full well Namco was going to put some of their best music into the actual game itself. And one more time I'm going to bounce the wall there because I'm trying to drift and just basically screwing it up. Rave Racer definitely has a completely different feel, and that's why it seems like it's either everyone's favorite game or least favorite game in the Ridge Racer franchise. But as far as a PlayStation 1 recomp, Kaczynski absolutely nailed the brief when it talks about what you need to do about making this a good experience. From the visuals to the performance to getting 16:9, perspective correctness, no wobbling in the textures or polygons, it just 100% works. So if you want to play this one today, the link is in the description below to GitHub, but do remember this is not version 1.0. The developer Kaczynski wants your guys' bug reports, and if you go over to the issues tab, you'll see I launched one because I was having issues with Windows, both in the frame rate department and actually getting it to run, and it was a Visual Studio dependency that was not included in the build. But now it's fixed up, you can play it today, and you definitely should, because Rave Racer 10 out of 10 game, and this recomp is outstanding so far. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.